Just wanted to mention and talk about some issues that have come up this week in MMA. First off, I've been asked a lot about the retirement of Conor McGregor. Spoke about it a little bit, or at length, on the new podcast I'm doing, but I keep getting asked about it, so I feel it bears repeating. What do I think of Conor McGregor's retirement? Do I think it's legit? Where do I put him all time? All those things. Number one, retiring in combat sports is never believable. It's never secure. I don't believe it until somebody really stops fighting for a few years. Then I'll believe it. What effect does it have? Obviously, a big name fighter who generated a ton of interest is supposedly retiring. He wasn't that active, so it doesn't throw a division into chaos. There aren't a lot of what ifs in terms of what it does for the division, the UFC, moving forward. The structure's already there. He wasn't fighting that often. So I don't think it has a huge effect right now on the division itself. Does it have an effect financially? Yeah, of course. I mean, big name, made them a lot of money, and had a lot of crossover appeal to get people who weren't necessarily interested in MMA into MMA. Nowadays, if there's one mixed martial artist, it's Conor McGregor. It was Ronda Rousey. I mean, that baton gets handed every time, but McGregor made a ton of money for the UFC, so that will be missed. Functionally, it moves along well, simply because it's not a huge impact on the division because he wasn't very active. Where do I put him all time? The problem, and I've done it before, I'll do it again. Teddy Atlas's quote about Mike Tyson. He said, "Greatness requires longevity." Mike didn't have longevity. Mike wasn't truly great. He actually called Mike spectacular. He said Mike was spectacular. Mike wasn't great. It's a similar thing, I think, with Conor McGregor, in that when you saw him fight, you went, wow, look at that. That's amazing. What he did to Eddie Alvarez, what he did to Jose Aldo, it was spectacular. True greatness requires that run through a division, and he never did that. He never settled down in a division as champion and mowed down every contender. When an all-time great retires, go back to boxing, Sugar Ray Robinson and Muhammad Ali. When you talk about in MMA, you talk about George St. Pierre and Anderson Silva, whomever. They don't leave many questions. You don't look at their run and go, God, what if? GSP fought everybody in his weight class that was at the top. Everybody. There isn't a name you look at and go, God, GSP never beat that one. He beat them all. Muhammad Ali in his prime beat everyone in the heavyweight division. There wasn't anyone you look back on in boxing history and go, God, if only he had fought so-and-so. Fought them all. Anderson Silva at 185 beat all of them. So Conor never did that. He was never in one division as champion long enough to run through everybody and really give us that body of work. Once he was established as a champion, especially as a double champion, it was big money stuff. Floyd Mayweather took a long break away from MMA, came back for one fight against Khabib. So it was stopping and starting all the time. There wasn't that canon of names that the great ones tend to leave behind them. So fun to watch, really entertaining, meant a lot for the sport outside of MMA, meaning bringing eyeballs to MMA. But within MMA, I don't put him as an all-time great because of that run that he didn't have. There's so many questions about what happened and who he could have fought and what he could have done had he stayed at 45 or 55 and really tried to run through guys. Also, his most entertaining competitive fights were with Nate Diaz, who you have to remember at the time was a fringe top 10 guy at 55. He wasn't, almost those fights elevated Nate. At the time, he was not considered a top 10 guy. A lot of people didn't think he had a prayer. John Anik has a tattoo, 209, because he didn't think Diaz had a prayer. That was a big upset. So the interesting thing to me is it's almost as if Ali and Frazier was a fringe top 10 heavyweight at the time. There was no... His toughest fights were against a guy that a lot of people didn't think had a chance against him until he beat him. And then, of course, the rematch was huge. Really entertaining fights, great stuff. But that wasn't against the top guy. So it's very, very interesting looking at his legacy. Now, with all the money he's made and all he's done, he doesn't owe anyone anything. I would get out when I could, too. What I don't want to see is him being semi-retired and every fighter calling him out. Every time he goes for a jog, people going, oh, he's coming back, or him having Twitter beefs with fighters, and oh my God, Conor might be coming back. I can't handle 10 years of that. So combat sports is the only sport where retirement is iffy. I mean, once you retire from the NFL, you retire from the NFL. No one's waiting for Peyton Manning to come back and win a Super Bowl. It doesn't work that way. Combat sports, there's always that comeback. There's always that renaissance idea, that fantasy. I mean, rarely does it actually work, but that fantasy of somebody coming back and doing that. So I just don't want to see that drag on forever. Or he might be coming back. He might be coming back. He might be coming back ad nauseum. If he's out, he's out. Great. I really respect the guy and his ability to make his money and get out. If he comes back, fine. But I don't want to see that halfway for years. That would bug me. Everybody talking about today, Stipe versus Jon Jones. The middle of this year. What do I think of that? Really interesting. Not only is it an interesting fight, should it happen, but the idea that Jon Jones would go to heavyweight but not fight DC and instead fight Stipe, really, the message, I mean, DC, how long is DC going to stick around? Will he stick around long enough for Jon Jones to beat Stipe, hypothetically, and then fight DC? That's not a gimme fight. That's not an easy one. I think DC is the big money fight. That's the one everyone's kind of hyped about, kind of our Ali Frazier for MMA. It was a controversial ending last time with the PEDs and everything. So the idea that that match wouldn't happen because he'd rather fight Stipe, who isn't the champ, might be a great fight, but it's not easy. It's not a stepping stone fight either. So a showdown with DC might be in jeopardy if he fights Stipe. Stipe might win. Also, how long is DC going to fight? He might not stick around long enough for Jon Jones to get through Stipe and then take on Jon Jones. Because he said he's not going to stick around that much longer. I don't know what else he has to prove other than beating Jon Jones. That would be the pinnacle of his career. That would be the best send-off possible for DC, is to beat his nemesis Jon Jones right off into the sunset with the last victory. Does a fight with Stipe, as good and as entertaining as it would be, is it worth jeopardizing that big fight? That's the question for the promotion. That's the question for DC and Jon Jones. And Stipe is great. He'd love a fight with Jon Jones. But does it jeopardize that all-time trilogy fight? Because let's pretend they fight in the summer, June, July, August, who knows. That's another, what, then the end of the year, DC versus Jon Jones? Would he stick around that long? That's a huge question, and can he get past Stipe? So it kind of throws the monkey wrench into what is like a no-brainer, outstanding legacy fight, the third fight between Jon Jones and DC. So that's what I'm interested in. Not so much the fight itself, which is compelling. I would love to watch it, and I would certainly be tuning in. But what that means for the continuation of the Jon Jones-DC rivalry, which is huge. So those are my thoughts. I'll be breaking down the fights for this weekend very, very soon and making my picks and all that stuff. Probably tomorrow or the day after, but stay tuned, and we'll see what happens. Thanks, guys.